legislation that Mumbai has, that maximum city has, of being safe for women. But first, a powerful earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 6.0 on the Richter scale jolted Japan again just a short while ago. The Japanese Meteorological Agency says the quake was of the intensity 6 plus on the Japanese seismic scale. It hit Japan at 10:31 p.m. local time. The epicenter of the quake is in the eastern part of Shizuoka. The tremor was unusually shallow, striking just a kilometer under the surface. So the hypocenter of the earthquake was very, very shallow. That's, of course, a worrying trend. This is the largest aftershock to have struck Japan since that mega quake of 9 on the Richter scale that struck on Friday. That's why it's more worrying that the aftershocks are coming 5 days after the main shock. It led to scattered power outages and some injuries have also been reported. Another quake then struck just minutes later of magnitude 5.2. Why we are focusing on this is because the 5.2 and the 6 are earthquakes in themselves. Japan is witnessing aftershocks of such severe magnitudes. And clearly at this point of time, the danger in Japan is not over. So 10,000 people dead, and that number, of course, is still climbing. And even as Japan continues to battle the ravages of a monster earthquake, and tsunamis and fires, there is, of course, that nuclear tragedy that's lurking around the corner. More problems for the disaster-stricken Fukushima power plant. On Tuesday, despite efforts to cool down the facility's overheated reactors, another explosion was reported from a reactor at Fukushima. And officials have admitted that once again, radioactive materials have been leaked into the atmosphere.
A fresh explosion at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, the third blast in 3 days, and a fire at the fourth reactor. The situation is critical. Japan continues to stare at a nuclear catastrophe. Radiation levels near the melting reactors are 400 times higher than the annual legal limit, enough to endanger human lives. What's worse, the Japanese government has warned of more leaks.
ついては改めて福島第一原子力発電所から 20km の範囲はすでに大半の方は避難済みでありますけれども、この範囲に住んでおられる皆さんには全員この範囲の外に避難をいただくことが必要だと考えております。また 20km 以上 30km の範囲の皆さんには今後の原子炉の状況を勘案しますと、外出をしないで自宅や事務所など屋内に待機するようにしていただきたい。
Around 70,000 people within a 20-kilometer radius of the Fukushima plant have already been evacuated, but 140,000 still remain in the fast-expanding danger zone.
とても体に悪い物質が出ています。それで人体的に害が起きることをすごく心配しています。
17 crew members of the US Navy 7th Fleet have already been exposed to low level of radiation released from Fukushima's nuclear plant. The crew was on 3 helicopters conducting rescue operations outside Sendai city. The threat of radiation is also looming over Tokyo. Low level of radioactive wind is expected to reach the Japanese capital. Tokyo has reported slightly elevated radiation levels.
そうですね、やっぱりその規模で見たら、大丈夫とは言ってますけどね、実際本当にどこまで本当のことを言ってるかっていうのもありますし、不安です、正直。
The Japanese government is angry. Prime Minister pulled up the power company for failing to inform his office about the third blast in time. Clearly, the embattled firm and even the government are struggling hard to get a grip on a fast deteriorating situation.
The worst fear came true today when the government announced and accepted that the radiation limits in Tokyo exceed the normal parameters. This was the worst fear come true for the residents of a country who has faced the wrath and attack of the only atomic attack in the world. The camera person Sri Kumar, Karthik Sharma from Tokyo for Headlines Today.
Japan's darkest hour is really turning out to be a long and painful one. The explosions at Fukushima nuclear plant have only added to the misery after that monster earthquake, then the tsunami, then the fires that devastated large parts of the country. And more than 65 years after the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan again stares at the nuclear catastrophe. The difference is that this time the nuclear threat comes from within, and yet Japan is not being able to stop it.
Fears of radiation exposure is rising in Japan. People are leaving towns that fall within the radiation radius. Thousands are flocking the airport, mostly foreigners, in a mad scramble to get out of Japan. These scenes follow warnings issued by the Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary, who said that the radiation levels are high enough to be harmful to human health.
I would like all of you to embrace this information calmly, that these are readings taken near the area where we believe that the release of radioactive substances is happening. The further away you get from the power plant or reactor, the values should go down.
The readings were taken at 10:22 a.m. Japan time. Hirano said 400 millisieverts of radiation was detected around the number 38 reactor. He says this level of radiation is harmful to human health.
Experts warn that the nuclear reactor blast will expose population to long-term exposure to radiation.
That when dose is not that high, symptoms will be seen from 1 to 10 years of their lifespan, and they can be seen anytime in the form of cataract, in the form of cancer. Any part of the body may show symptoms of cancer, or hereditary defects can be seen.
A small dose of radiation can cause detectable changes in blood. The first signs of radiation sickness are nausea, vomiting, and hair loss after a week. Radiation can damage the gastrointestinal tract and reproductive tract, and in particular, the thyroid. Mass radiation, as is the case in Japan, destroys white blood cells, leaving people susceptible to infection. Over the long term, exposure to radiation damages bone marrow, greatly increasing the risk of developing cancer, particularly leukemia and thyroid cancer. Extreme radiation exposure, as might have been the case with workers inside the nuclear plants in Japan, can cause death due to internal bleeding. While the extent of radiation damage in Japan is not fully known yet, it will be a long battle for survival for those who emerge from this nuclear crisis. With Durga Nandini in Delhi, Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
Alright, on the inside story, we're really trying to figure out how bad is really this threat of radiation. Is it bad enough for the government to evacuate its citizens from within a 30-kilometer radius around the Fukushima plant? Bad enough for it to turn away journalists who are trying to get a sense of the after effects of the radiation? Now, this is what happened to Headlines Today's team as they tried to enter Sendai to get rid of the